very welcome to this event, and I would like to say a few things about the practical things. We will spend the afternoon here at the Day on Gateway, and we have organized 3 roundtable discussions. And each discussion is about 1 hour and 15 minutes, then we will have a break. I think we will spend maybe 50 minutes having the panelists to discuss, and then open up for everybody in the audience. So if you have questions, reflections, things you want to add, contribute with, so please take some notes. And I also think that if someone will talk too much, I have this. So then I would say this is enough. And we have planned for the 3 roundtable discussions. And the first one is a discussion between Alain Fayol, Eva Leffler, and Gustav Hägg. And I have asked them to participate because I see them as experts when it comes to the issues and questions to discuss. And we all know that entrepreneurship has emerged as an important economic force. And in parallel to this, we can also see that we have a lot of entrepreneurship educations all around the world in universities. And it's interesting because it's a response to probably also a very much a policy-driven approach to the need for entrepreneurship. And but somehow the field has been established, and I think that you hopefully can agree with me that we are not always so sure about which pedagogical and theoretical grounds are we actually basing our entrepreneurship education on. And that is actually the topic for this first roundtable discussion. And so it's titled Theoretical and Philosophical Perspectives and Frames in Entrepreneurship Teaching. And I would like to start with letting you introduce yourself a little and to tell the audience why have you ended up in this field and what is shortly your background and what is really the driving force for being involved in entrepreneurship education and learning. And let's start with you, Ellen.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alain Fayol. I'm an entrepreneurship professor at the Lyon Business School in France, where I'm directing the Entrepreneurship Research Center. I started teaching entrepreneurship in early 90s, and at that time, I had a lot of questions, a lot of important questions. I'm not sure that through time these questions decrease in number and in intensity. I think I have probably now more and more questions about my practice and about the way research can help my teaching practice. So my motivations are more or less in relation to what I said. So.
Okay. Eva.
I am a middle-aged teacher, and I have a PhD in educational work, and I am an associate professor in education. And my driving force is school development and to motivate pupils and teachers to develop their teaching practice, so everyone can feel that they are involved and that the teaching has a meaning both for the individuals and for the society. That's my driving force.
Hello, my name is Gustav Hägg. I'm a PhD student here in Lund, and I'm doing my dissertation on theoretical and pedagogical foundations in entrepreneurship education. So, and I am halfway through, so I still have a lot to discover, a lot to connect within pedagogy and entrepreneurship. But that is mainly my driving force, to try to find these connections between learning literature and entrepreneurship literature, and how it kind of could lead to us understand how we develop knowledge in entrepreneurship students.
Thank you. So I made a statement that's like the starting point for this roundtable discussion, and saying that that entrepreneurship education is lacking solid theoretical foundations upon which the pedagogical models and methods are built. And then I say that a consequence is that it is not that obvious how we should construct our courses and programs and what to include in them to make sure that we equip our students in the best way. So of course I would like to ask you, do you agree? Are we lacking pedagogical foundations and theoretical, empirical, and practical grounds about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship education? And if so, what are the consequences and for our education and when we educate our students? And again, I think it would be nice if you, Alain, would like to start to reflect upon this.
Okay, yes, I agree with you. We are lacking of theoretical and pedagogical foundations, and I would like to share with you some examples, recent examples. Last week, I've been invited as a keynote speaker in the first conference in entrepreneurship education in Portugal. And the questions they raise in this conference turn around the best practices in entrepreneurship education. What could be the best practices in entrepreneurship education? As attendees in this conference would like to get a lot of insights about best practices. Also, one point turns around improving teaching skills. Focusing on this dimension, I would say, of pedagogy, the operational dimensions. Probably they have in mind the things around learning by doing approaches, experiential methods, things like that. They also were interested in entrepreneurial universities. What does it mean? Entrepreneurial university is a huge concept, and I discussed with Diamanto previously at the lunchtime of the topic. So I think in entrepreneurship education, very often we raise right questions. Questions make sense, are really important, but at least to me, we bring wrong answers. Because focusing on the best practices in entrepreneurship education ask a lot of other questions. Would it be possible to identify best practices in our field? What kind of meanings it brings? So, to me, the answers which were brought in this conference were not the good ones, probably, and we need to take some distance and reflect differently about this. Also, this morning I got a message from a very good scholar in entrepreneurship, well experienced, and he raised some questions. Can entrepreneurship be taught? The first one. Should we be teaching skill set, mindset, or both? And finally, what is an effective pedagogical approach? Does it mean case study, simulation, experiential, textbook, and so on? My point is to share with you the fact that very often we are focusing on methods, techniques, and we have a lot of notions in mind, like, again, learning by doing, experiential learning, but we have a lot of difficulties to define precisely what does it mean, these notions. We are using a lot the word pedagogy, but probably weakly defined and understood by most of us, I suppose. Pedagogy is not only communication skills, is not only techniques, is not only discourses in sociology, psychology, media-based discourses, um, about the topic, it's much more complex. It includes at least three dimensions: axiological dimensions in relation to values, value judgment. It's really important when teaching entrepreneurship to be clear about uh, one definition of entrepreneurship, one definition of entrepreneurship education, and don't let on the side this kind of ontological questions. Second dimension is scientific. It means that we have to get knowledge and assimilate knowledge about education and educational phenomenon. It means learning probably from education as a field, getting theories, identifying useful concepts, things like that. And the third dimension is a praxeological dimension. And we are really on the in relation to the operational level, I mean methods, techniques, to design educational setting and to act in education. So pedagogy is a broader concept than the use we have really, at least when we talk with colleagues and when we present a paper in a conference, things like that. So I think it's
Yes.
enough at that time, so I can again.
Thank you. So Eva, your perspectives and maybe some reflections of what Alain has said.
I agree that teaching and education is a complex. It's not easy to understand because it's also it depends on the context and the goal. And what is the goal? And if the goal is to bring up entrepreneurs, or is the goal to bring up entrepreneurial skills and attitudes to learning. So I think it's not that easy to say this method is the best method or this pedagogic is the best pedagogic. And as I'm not teaching in the subject entrepreneurship, I'm the narrow perspective, if you say so. I'm teaching in the broad perspective, and we start in Sweden with the small children from the first grade and up the whole education system. And the purpose is not for those to bring up entrepreneurs, but to make them using entrepreneurial to use an entrepreneurial attitude to teaching and learning may give them the opportunities to take initiatives and to be motivated. And maybe when they grow up, they can see starting business as one opportunity in life, not the only opportunity. So I think we have very big different questions to face. There's not one question, there are many questions. I think I'll stop there.
So, not that reflectively done, and you start to point out that we see two different discourses or perspectives, that we have entrepreneurship as starting a business and we have entrepreneurship as trying to influence attitudes, skills in a more broader perspective. So excellent, Gustav.
Yes. So I should make some sort of synthesis of this then. First of all, to those in the audience that are not that into entrepreneurship education and the literature around it, there are two main streams in entrepreneurship education, where we have the more narrow form of looking at entrepreneurship as a subject, teaching in the subject. And then we have the more broader term of enterprising, which is more about a culture, how to behave, more or less. And it's important to distinguish the differences between those when we address what it is to be taught in the different types of educations, at least from my perspective, because it makes a difference when we teach or when we develop courses in entrepreneurship which are subject specific, focused on the core elements of, for example, the startup process. There we can talk about the didactics, which is the elements of the startup process that we want the students to learn. And then we add the pedagogical elements and techniques to that in order to create a learning environment. Whilst if we take enterprising, which might not teach in the core subject of startup, there might be a different view on how to educate these type of characteristics that we see as entrepreneurial, and where we also can see similarities to previous progressive educational theories, which have brought up similarities.
I just have to ask, where do you place intrapreneurship, for example?
Not my area of study. I think I rest on that one.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts, ideas? If we stress that intrapreneurship is important in business profit-making organizations as well as in non-profit organizations, is it the enterprise thing that we? What do you think, Eva? Is it? Or
I think it's hard to define, to take this concept separately, because it depends on what you are doing. You can become innovative in entrepreneurship, and you can become an entrepreneur when you. So I think it's difficult to.
Yeah, I would add that I fully agree with you when you said that entrepreneurship education strongly depends on the context and the goals. Intrapreneurship, corporate entrepreneurship follows very specific goals from companies, and also the context, the organizational context is really specific. So if it makes sense, but we can discuss about does it make sense to teach corporate entrepreneurship. It's another question. We have to design educational settings accordingly to the context and the understanding we have of the context and the goals. That's my point of view. But
my next question is, why do we lack pedagogical as well as theoretical, empirical, and practical grounds? How can it come that we have been teaching entrepreneurship in 3 decades and we are here discussing what do we actually do?
That's my question
yeah.
too.
But do you have an answer for the question? Or?
No, I think it's quite interesting as a pedagogue, because when I started with this research, my first question was, who is the entrepreneur? And what is the entrepreneur going to do in schools? Why do we need this in our schools? So that was my starting point. And when I tried to find out about entrepreneurship in schools and entrepreneurship education and entrepreneurial education, I saw that there was a lack of pedagogic discussions. Because I wonder, what are the pedagogical grounds in this teaching? Because you can teach entrepreneurship without being entrepreneurial, can't you?
Can't you?
For example, open for business, it's one very strong concept when you go from A to B to C to D. But what is it to be entrepreneurial? And how can you, I think you need to be a sort of entrepreneurial teacher if you want if you want to that the students should also become entrepreneurial, because it doesn't make sense otherwise. You need to think, as education is today, you need to think in new ways. You need to be more innovative. You need to face and embrace the whole individual in the society and to find out the life word of the student today, to reach the student and to make the student to reflect on their teaching, their learning as well. Where did I start? I don't remember. But
Why do we sit and discuss this, having done this for 3 decades?
because I have a question to you.
Yeah.
I tried to read some of your papers
My
before
God.
before I went here, and I tried to find out. I need my glasses. That you said you're largely inspired by education sciences, but I couldn't. Who are these education sciences that you are inspired of? Who are is it Frenet? Is it you? Is it who are you what pedagogical theories are you inspired of when you teach?
Probably I meant in this paper and in my daily life that I'm really interested in reading a lot of papers, a lot of books in education in order to identify, find some concepts, some approaches quite different from whose I'm using, and I try to get connected things in education and entrepreneurship, and to make this kind of relationship. Because it's one of my point answering your question, why are we lacking of pedagogical and theoretical elements in entrepreneurship education? One answer could be because there is a big distance between education and entrepreneurship, and because there are gaps between policy, research, and practice. And it's really because our field, even if we have 3 decades behind us, is very, very young. And it's an emergent practice and field of research and entrepreneurship education. So we have a lot of things to be aware of, and a lot of works to do, mainly at the research level. And fundamentally, we have to be aware of this, you know. So for example, when I started a research project in the middle of 90s, it was in relation to for me, very important questions. Assessment of entrepreneurship education. I worried at that time because I had no good theoretical framework, good concepts, and I gave up my project due to these concerns. And 5, 6 years later, I found in education very inspiring, and also in psychology, very inspiring theories which helped me in going further. You know, so that's why I'm really, really interested in reading a lot of things from education. But I'm not a specialist in education. You know.
But sometimes it can be good to rely on a theorist and to visualize this theorist. If we're lacking theories, maybe we should become more visible on what theories our ground is on.
Gustav, who are you inspired by? If we look at the pedagogical side, who inspires you?
Well,
And why?
why?
Who and why?
I would say I started actually, when I started doing research, I started in metacognition, trying to understand how to learn, or think to think, which kind of got me into reflective learning. And then I got interested in Dewey and his conceptualization of what reflective thinking is within learning. So I'm largely inspired by a progressive educational theoretical perspective, where learning is supposed to happen through the experiences one undertakes in education. But at the same time, I'm also questioning whether or not we actually have understood it in the way that he tried to visualize what this theory was supposed to deliver when it came to knowledge development in students or pupils. And I think that a lot of what happened during the 80s and 70s was that entrepreneurship was developed through policy interventions. It was strongly related to the current winds of the liberal societies that we were entering into, the neoliberal. And that, of course, had an impact on pushing entrepreneurship into education. And the problem was that entrepreneurship hadn't been positioned as a domain-specific subject. It didn't have the same long roots as all other subjects had that had developed their pedagogical ideas during years and years and years of practice. And I think that has much to do with the search that we are entering right now. Because during the 80s, there was a lot of discussions in educational theory around pedagogics and less on the content, because the content had been positioned for a very long time. So entrepreneurship entered when there was a strong discussion about pedagogics, especially influenced by adult education literature. And that kind of, in my view, made the field go more for how to understand the process of learning entrepreneurship. And then the more content part were positioned within the business plan or something like that. But less was focused on what is it specific that is to be learned for entrepreneurship. To have a stable ground on what to learn. What is the core threshold concepts in entrepreneurship? What is it that everybody needs to know to have some sort of basic line of knowledge for this subject, if we put it as a subject? And I think that if we go back to this experiential, experience-based theories, they fit very well to how practicing entrepreneurs behave. And that was also an influence in entrepreneurship education. So it's not so strange that we are very diversified within entrepreneurship education, because we use in different contexts, in different countries, we see entrepreneurship in different ways, and we also use different approaches to learning. And I'm just trying to figure out what kind of theories could actually be merged into this diffusion that I feel as a new scholar within the field.
Do you have any reflections on what Gustav said? Or?
I'm also using Dewey when we're trying to analyze how we interpret entrepreneurial learning. It fit quite well with Dewey's thoughts of learning. But that's one way. That's only one way.
So then I will continue with my next question. I think that we can agree that one of the important things for us as university teachers is to help our students to develop a critical thinking. And I wonder, do we do that, and how do we do it in the context of entrepreneurship education? What is critical thinking when it comes to entrepreneurship education?
Well,
anyone can
yeah,
answer.
I can start, because critical thinking is actually quite close to reflective thinking. It's the difference between them two on theoretical terms are quite small, actually. It's a way of using knowledge towards what you do within within the context and try to understand whether or not it's try to make some sort of suggestions on how to move forward, whether or not to trust or distrust the information that you have. But in order to develop a critical ability, you have to have a deep knowledge base. You have to be very knowledgeable about the domain that you are entering into in order to be able to question it. You have to know what grounds it stands on. You have to know what kind of what you can criticize on which premises. And I'm not sure, if I go back to my earlier discussion, that I find the subject quite diffusing. I'm not sure if we are able to create this criticality in the students if they don't have this broad or deep knowledge base about the domain. What are they supposed to discuss if they don't have the deep knowledge of it? That is, then you can always draw from different fields, but that doesn't go exactly along with how theories discuss it. So it's, yeah.
I agree with what Gustav said. I also think that critical thinking is close to reflective thinking, and one objective in entrepreneurship courses could be to help students developing reflective, critical thinking by providing them with multidisciplinary knowledge, I would say, in economy, in sociology, in psychology, to help them getting a better understanding about the world they are or they will be experiencing. And it's really important to for them to clearly see the place of entrepreneurship in societies and economies, and the role of entrepreneurs based on this deep knowledge in different disciplines. And it's really, really, really important to me.
And does that also include looking at entrepreneurship as a neoliberal tool for developing the society? And do you teach your students about that, or maybe you don't see it as that, but because that was a question for you also, Eva. when entrepreneurship is moving into the lower educations and we look at this at enterprising, what do we do?
I think for me, this critical thinking is about what society are we fostering our students into? Do we need a special critical thinking when it becomes to entrepreneurship? Then, because if we is entrepreneurship for everyone, and what are the views of an entrepreneur? Is it, and when they come to these courses, because when I meet teachers, they are just talking about the marketization of schools and this neoliberal thinking. Are we supposed to foster individuals? Foster individuals who only think about themselves? And do we have this democratical fosterance that is very important as well. So I think it's you need to be critical in one way when you foster younger students. So when they come to universities, they have this in mind. It's not only about me. I want my pathway, and university is going to help me to find the right pathway so I can become a rich and famous. So I think we need to be very aware of how we use this concept of entrepreneurship in school, because it's important what society we have in mind.
I think I would like to invite all of you to ask some questions or give some reflections on what has been said. Karen, and we have a microphone because, as you see, we're filming the discussion. So,
It's just a very quick question building on this stream of talking about critical thinking. How would you relate critical thinking to contextualization? We talked about context a little bit, and also around citizenship, because if we think about entrepreneurial education or learning at the university level, we're talking about preparing individuals to become citizens in society. So,
who would like to start?
Well, I can start.
Yeah.
I regularly start my entrepreneurship courses with 1 or 2 sessions based on exactly what you said. I mean, helping the students in being more intelligent, in understanding the French society where they are living, in order to clearly identify opportunities for their career and their position regarding entrepreneurship. Am I an entrepreneur or not? I'm interested in creating a new company or acting as a corporate entrepreneur in a large organization. So that's why I talked about a multidisciplinary approach, because I'm using knowledge from economy and mainly from sociology to help them improving this kind of understanding. And it's really, really important to contextualize entrepreneurship teaching in this way.
Well, I don't do so much teaching, so but I at least have some visions of what I would like to incorporate in higher educations when it comes to making students aware through their reflective learning. And I think that it's important to bring out or tease out the good, the bad, and the ugly of all subjects, so that students are aware and can make their own judgment calls around all topics that they are learning, not just entrepreneurship. Although entrepreneurship is often seen as some sort of hallelujah, we're going to save the world, because that is how it has been pictured a lot through policies, because that is what they ride on in order to save their own responsibilities of steering countries. But still, it's the student that are coming in, they have to also be aware of the good, the bad sides of all subjects. So it's not just entrepreneurship, but especially since entrepreneurship is so vivid in societies and promoted, I think it's important that it is lifted within this subject, because otherwise people will become colored by a lot of others, and that will impact them, of course. And it is part of this political movements and these normalization processes. But I think that is what I would like to make them aware of, the critical aspects.
I would like to ask Karen, what do you do to? Do you have an answer for your question? Yeah.
I think, well, I'm Karen Williams-Middleton. I'm from Chalmers. So obviously I'm contextualized in a technical space. And I think that's the first thing that we, not just me, but myself and my colleague Mats and our other colleagues at Chalmers do to start with. We're very clear in the fact that we are looking at entrepreneurship from a technical perspective, and that brings certain criteria into the way in which we approach. We're very clear about the fact that we're trying to emphasize value creation, not just venture creation, even though we have a venture creation program, and that value is about value not just for yourself, but value for others. So I think as much as we have an understanding that entrepreneurship comes from an economic space, we're trying to look at value creation for others as the main motivation for entrepreneurship. So I think in one sense, both in a subject area in terms of the fact that we focus on technology and technology development, and that has its limitations and certain criteria, and then also the fact that we're looking for responsibility and value creation towards others. So that type of citizenship.
Do you want to say something?
I think knowledge is very important, because when I meet teachers, they need to know what benefits there are by using this in their teaching and learning. So if you don't know what it is about, you don't know how to teach, and you don't know what the benefits are. So I think, according to be talking about theories, I think teachers need some theoretical ground to understand what this is about. And then when they know what it is about, it's easy for them to see what are the benefits for me as a teacher and for the students, because we have 25% of the students in upper secondary school who doesn't want to be there, and we can't afford to lose them. So we need to think, how can we meet the students of today, and to motivate them that knowledge is important, and that they are important for society.
Yes.
Yes. Hello, I'm Anne-Marie Mathiesen from KIA in Copenhagen. And you were mentioning, I think, Gustav, but it's a question to all, that critical thinking in relation to entrepreneurship is about use of knowledge in the context that you're in. And I very much agree that you need a knowledge base in order to do that. And I'm just thinking, as an entrepreneurship teacher, if I want to include more critical, reflective thinking, which I very much would like to do, what is the method to do that? Is there a method to do that?
Good question.
I can bring some elements of answer. I'm heavily using what I call teaching journal. I ask the students session after session to react on the content, theoretical content, the methodological content, and give their point of view about what do I learn in this session, and what kind of objectives I can define to go further. That's modestly my approach.
What do you do, Eva?
It depends, but I think there's a lack of reflection. To become critical, you need to have time to reflect on what you have read, or what you have heard, and what you have discussed, and to put that in a sort of a context where you can step aside to view from above, to see what has really happened, what directions did we take, and why did we take these, what questions did we ask, and why did we ask these questions, how do we ask questions, what are the purpose of our ways of asking questions, because we get answers, they rely on our questions. So we produce answers by using questions. I think that's one way of thinking critically of what you're doing.
I have a really good small assignment when I start the course. I ask everybody to take a white paper, and you could all participate in this little assignment now, and we will see what we find. If you write 1, 2, 3, 4 in a paper in front of you, and then after number 1, you write down the name of an entrepreneur that comes to your mind. The name of an entrepreneur that you start to think about. If you think entrepreneur, this is the person you think about. And after number 2, I would like you to write down the name of a female entrepreneur. It could be the same as the first. It's not that common, but it could be. And then after number 3, if you write down the name of an immigrant entrepreneur, ethnic entrepreneur, immigrant entrepreneur. It can be the same. And then after number 4, if you write down the name of a social entrepreneur. Could be the same. I do understand why you got the award, Bengt. So maybe you would like to share how many of you wrote down the name of a female entrepreneur after number 1? So we have like, quite many. I guess maybe 20% in the room. That is quite high, actually. Did anyone write down the name of Ingvar Kamprad or Steve Jobs or Bill Gates after number 1? Some of you did. Because this is very illustrative in a group of 200 students. And you can have a quite nice discussion. Because already after number 2, some of the students are saying, I don't know. So they have to leave it blank. And then you can discuss what is the image of entrepreneurship that we actually have and who is called into becoming an entrepreneur and who do we exclude. And it's always the same. Ingvar Kamprad, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates are on the top. And it's could be up to 50-60% in the classroom who writes down the name of those. But you, I guess, could fill in all 4, couldn't you? And who did you write, Bengt, if you have the same on all? The microphone.
So actually I had a man, a social entrepreneur on the top. But then I had a woman all the way down, Leila Yumer. She's a young female, obviously, entrepreneur from Bulgaria originally. And she fitted into all the 3 remaining assignments.
And it's also quite interesting because you can have a discussion about what is actually ethnic or immigrant entrepreneurship and what is entrepreneurship at all. Maybe you already do this little assignment, but I think it is quite good. We also introduced the book Illusions of Entrepreneurship very early in a course that we have. And students can be a little bit provoked because it's questioning like entrepreneurship, and it's a book by Scott Shane. So that's also a way to get them questioning what is this about. So yeah, and now we have a new question, Tommy.
Yes, hello. My name is Hong Shi and I'm from Stenko Jonsson. I haven't been there for very long and I've only been involved in entrepreneurship teaching for maybe a couple of months. So I wasn't very experienced in that field. But what I noticed is that there's this disconnect between what is an entrepreneur and what we can teach actually. And I mean, we always have this romanticized view of an entrepreneur being, you know, this person breaking rules, breaking structures, but really what we can teach is not really that, but it's more about the contextualization. So there's this disconnect, and what I'm thinking about here is, could we here learn, in terms of method or progression, could we learn from other fields? I studied music for 2 years at university, but we can also talk about creative arts. But even we have composers there, we have people that want to be composers, there are the people that wants to improvise, but teaching there is very much about technique, about structures, about learning a craft. But I hear very little in entrepreneurship education about where can we learn? I mean, can we learn something from these educations?
Alan, what do you think?
Sure, we can we can learn from education or from arts or from any discipline. You use the word inspiring extracted from my article. I think we are facing a very complex issue and the questions, and this first round table is a good example of we are asking much more questions than bringing answers to some of them. I think it's a matter of individuals. You are inspired by music, and why not if it can help you in thinking differently, in improving your practice, your teaching design, and so on. Others could be inspired by different disciplines. In my case, I was really inspired by reading articles and papers in education. I think it's really personal. In an emergent field, we can be innovative, but don't losing our way, I would say. I mean, not focusing too much on some techniques or methods and paying a great importance to these techniques and methods. To me, it's really important to have a broad view and to go back regularly to educational models accordingly to the context we are teaching and some objectives or goals for our courses.
Some more reflections?
I think it's hard to say because I don't teach the entrepreneurship as a subject. So, but I think interdisciplinary is important in any ways. Yeah, it can help.
Kattis?
Yes, hello, I'm working at the Linnaeus University teaching entrepreneurship. And I think that the methods from aesthetic learning processes are kind of similar when you work with methods and entrepreneurial learning. So I can see lots of things in common there when you do things, when you are reflective and you go into something that you can't sometimes put your finger on. It's more like it's hard to grasp. So aesthetic learning processes in, I think, Eva, what do you think about that? And entrepreneurial learning as methods or subjects or?
As I said, it's important to think interdisciplinary because if you're going to have a sort of, as I have interpreted, an entrepreneurial attitude to teaching and learning, it involves many different methods. Variation, we know that variation is important for learning, and then you need to pick up different things depending on the group you're working with. So I think you need to be flexible in your pedagogical way, because one group of students is not the same, even if you have the same course, but you meet different students, and then you have to be aware of where are they, how can I reach them before you start to teach. And then it's important to be inspired from different disciplines to get the students involved, and that's one way.
Some more questions? Diamanto?
Hi, my name is Diamanto. I was just wondering, you were talking about the multidisciplinary character of the phenomenon of entrepreneurship and the challenges we are actually facing in providing entrepreneurship education by making use of multidisciplinary theories, concepts, and what do you see are the main challenges here, and what can we actually bring into teaching entrepreneurship by making use of the existing knowledge we have from other disciplines?
You have probably the answer. I would say that making a relationship between your questions and the previous one. One example to get inspired by others, it is with the notion of evidence-based practice. I don't know if you have heard about what does it mean, evidence-based practice. It started in medicine, and now it has been applied in management, and there was a special issue in entrepreneurship referent practice around this notion of evidence-based entrepreneurship. I would add, in entrepreneurship education, it's really important to develop evidence-based entrepreneurship education. I mean, education, teaching strongly based on knowledge from research. And knowledge from research is multidisciplinary. It's obvious. It comes from economy, sociology, psychology, anthropology, management sciences, and also entrepreneurship. But it's multidisciplinary. And I think it's really, really a challenge to develop evidence-based entrepreneurship education. That's one element of my answer to your last question.
Yeah, good. Some other? Oh, Gustav or Eva, do you want to
just a
answer?
short one. But at the same time, if we look at other educational literature, it's also important to understand how students learn, how we learn in complex situations. And those issues are also very important because we talk about multidisciplinarity, different subjects that is entrepreneurship. But then we also have to recognize the complexities that the students are facing when they get this multidisciplinarity. How do the students grasp this? Do they understand it? That is also because we can have different types of techniques and pedagogical processes within a program if we teach the same content, the same subject. Then we have something that is stable for the students. Then we can have less variation in pedagogical approaches, but with a variety of topics. Then we have some sort of stability, at least looking at the other side of learning literature, which is more cognitive, whilst the more experiential is more on the behavioral side and constructivistic side. But on the more cognitive side, there are certain research that limits how students actually grasp knowledge. And that is also important to have in mind when we develop this, because we can't just develop it by flux, because then it becomes, do they actually learn? Because we know that they are limited in these areas, and they don't have the cognitive capacity as experienced entrepreneurs, for example. There comes the big divide between education and how practical entrepreneurs learn.
Thank you. We have one more question from Magnus Klofsten.
Yes, you have long experience in maybe most of you have a long experience on teaching entrepreneurship, and also you have even longer background in teaching students at different levels, you know. And entrepreneurship is a very young subject. I mean, it came in the beginning of the 90s, mostly starting business, but in the school system, I think the past 10 years, maybe. And it's easy to be critical to entrepreneurship. But my question is, what good has entrepreneurship brought into the school system and the university system? Because I mean, I'm sure that you wanted to have creative students even during the 70s and 80s, no? Or structured thinking and learning and things like that. Do you have any reflection on that?
I think if you're a student in school, when teachers are engaged, they know what to do and why to do, and have this involvement of the students. I think, and the students want to be there. I think that's one point. If you want to be in school and you want to learn, that's positive, of course. That's why we have schools. And I think there's a lack of longitudinal studies to see what has really happened with these students, because it still is so. We have so many teachers who actually they don't know what they actually are doing when they're supposed to teach in an entrepreneurial way. So it's hard to see what has really happened to the students. But we can see in small projects that the students they get more, they become more motivated, and sometimes they say, this is really fun, it's better than school. And now we need to bring it into the school in a more clear way, because if maybe it's not the name entrepreneur that's that's the most important. It's not the most important. It's how education actually grows and develops. That's the most important. That they have a goal together with the students. Then they can become entrepreneurs when they grow up. Anyway, if you want to have it that way.
Do we have a final question from the audience? You have to have the... You need to have it because of the filming.
Do you think the word critical thinking is an educational and university disease? Certainly not the same as reflective learning.
Gustav?
Yes. I would say that depends on how you actually take on critical thinking. Because criticality could easily backfire. It could mean demoralizing everything. But a critical stance is not to be critical just because of criticality. It's about learning to develop yourself and your view on certain topics, on certain ways of behaving. So I don't see it as, because when we have master thesis supervisions, we tell our students to be critical towards each other, which might backfire because they start to rage against each other because they are so poor, etc. But that is not critical thinking or critical ability in my world. It's about constructively advancing yourself with a critical approach towards the subject that you are actually entering into.
As opposed to a creative approach.
What?
Is that different from as opposed to a creative approach? Is that as opposed to a creative approach?
Maybe we have one more question raised, but not the answer. Do you have the answer, Alan? Or what do you think? The microphone. No?
Disease, but no, I think, I mean, I learned a lot of my approaches to entrepreneurship from working with entrepreneurs. And I would always start out by asking them what they think. Yes, and I've used that with primary school kids and secondary school kids and university people. What do they think? Without filling their heads with frameworks and concepts and all the kind of critical thing, which actually limits their ability to learn. I mean, Vygotsky says you start from where people are and where they can go. And we continuously start from where we shovel knowledge in frameworks and get them to be critical, put them in a narrow framework for criticizing things. And talking about music and about poetry, you know, I would have loved my teacher at school to ask me what I felt about a poem, why I felt about a poem, how it related to me and my experience, instead of giving me some blessed framework from somebody to tell me how to critique the poem. That's the antithesis of real learning and embedding it in. And that's what I learned from entrepreneurs. And I think we have a disease, using the word, how many questions in university papers are critical examination of, critique, and so on and so forth, which is negative deconstruction of something as opposed to creation. And that's a disease, I think. But that's just my view.
But I think you have a point, because the rhetoric is very important. We're talking about fellow workers, that if you view the group of students as fellow workers, then we don't need to use the word critique, because then our purpose is to help each other to grow and to learn as much as possible. So I think it's important how we use the words, and so the rhetoric is very important.
So, before ending this roundtable discussion, I would like you to just say what do you see as the major challenge for the future for the field of entrepreneurship, learning, and education. And Gustav, we will start with you.
Thank you. The main challenge, I would say that within the next within the next decade, it would be to prove towards policy that we actually make a difference. I would say, because they have provided a lot of funds into this, but still there are uncertainties of what we bring to the table back to policy. So I think that would be which is related to assessment practices and so on, which is important. Maybe not for the student learning, but for legitimizing the subject, the area of entrepreneurship and enterprising on a higher level.
Eva?
I think one challenge is the gender equality, because as I can see in upper secondary school, girls in the entrepreneurship courses, they wearing suits and they start to talk like boys. And is it that we want with entrepreneurship education?
The norm of the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Yep. Alan, finally.
Yeah, three challenges. First, as I said previously, developing evidence-based entrepreneurship education, narrowing the gaps between policy, research, and practice, the second one. And finally, probably it relates to the two previous challenges, improving our credibility and legitimacy at both research and practice levels.
Thank you very much.